On February 3rd, 1998, an aircraft returned to the US Aviano Air Base in Italy, heavily damaged in its right wing, and was forced to make an emergency landing. The crew thought they had hit something, but they were not sure what it was. At that time, according to the crew, they did not know that they were responsible for the deaths of 20 innocent people. Cavallese is a small town at the foot of the Alps, specifically at a mountain called Cermis, which is well known for skiing from November until April, when it is fully covered in snow. Tourists flock to the area, many of them staying in Cavallese, using the cable car and ski lifts to reach the mountain slopes every day. The cable car and ski lift system was built in the 1960s, when tourism became very important to the town. In 1976, a serious accident occurred when a cable snapped and a gondola full of people fell to the ground, killing 42 passengers. The sole survivor of that accident was a 14-year-old girl named Alessandra Piovesana. She recovered from her injuries, but remained haunted by the tragedy for the rest of her life. Despite that horrific incident, the cable car system was rebuilt and continued operating for years, carrying hundreds of people up and down the mountain every day. On February 3rd, 1998, a routine training flight took off from Aviano Air Base, a US military base. The aircraft was an EA-6B Prowler, part of a US Navy squadron. The plane was piloted by Captain Richard J. Ashby, with navigator Joseph Schweitzer, along with 2 other crew members. That day, the 4-man crew was conducting a series of low-altitude training exercises, practicing maneuvers at very low levels to improve their combat readiness. At the same time, dozens of skiers were preparing to head up to the higher slopes of Mount Cermis for an afternoon of skiing. 19 people boarded the gondola in Cavallese, accompanied by the operator in charge, and began their ascent around 3:13 p.m. Before the gondola reached its destination, the EA-6B Prowler passed by at high speed and dangerously low altitude, flying underneath the cable. But the plane's wings struck the cable and severed it, causing catastrophic damage to the aircraft. Immediately, the gondola plunged nearly 80 meters to the snow-covered ground below. The impact was devastating, and despite the quick arrival of rescue teams, none of the 19 passengers survived. Tourists from 6 different countries lost their lives in the tragedy, along with the Italian operator inside the gondola. Meanwhile, a second gondola traveling down on the parallel cable was empty except for its operator. That gondola did not fall but became stuck in place, and the operator was rescued hours later. After the collision, the plane attempted to climb rapidly. The crew knew the aircraft had been severely damaged, though they were unsure of the full extent. They tried to maintain altitude as best as they could to return safely to the base, and were also prepared to eject and abandon the aircraft if they lost control. Miraculously, they managed to bring the plane back to base despite the heavy damage to its landing gear and fuel leaks. They executed a safe emergency landing, and all crew members survived without injury. Later, it was discovered that the cable had caused severe damage to the wing, which was nearly detached from the fuselage. Investigations began immediately, focusing on what happened before and after the collision. Findings showed that the aircraft was flying at an altitude far below the legal minimum for the area, just 80 meters above ground. while the required minimum was 610 meters. In addition, the plane was flying faster than the permitted speed. The crew claimed that the altimeter, which displayed the aircraft's altitude, had temporarily malfunctioned during the flight. The EA-6B was an aging model from the 1970s, and by 1998, such malfunctions were common. The crew insisted this technical glitch contributed to their flying too low. Investigators also discovered that the crew was using outdated maps. Updated charts, which clearly showed the location of the cable lines, were available in the cockpit but remained unopened in a sealed envelope. Further evidence revealed that the crew had been filming themselves during the flight. A video camera was found in the cockpit containing a blank tape, but the tape that had recorded the flight had been removed and destroyed. Later, navigator Joseph Schweitzer admitted that he burned the videotape as soon as they returned to Aviano Air Base after the crash. He explained that he didn't do so because it contained incriminating evidence, but because it showed him clearly laughing and enjoying the view from the cockpit before the accident. He feared that the media would use those images to portray him as carefree and indifferent to the disaster, damaging his reputation. He decided to destroy the tape as a form of protection. However, his action, or perhaps because of it, sparked even greater outrage in Italy. The tragedy had already caused enormous anger, as 20 Europeans lost their lives due to the training of a foreign military outside of Europe. Italian prosecutors wanted the 4 US servicemen to be tried in Italian courts, but an Italian court ruled that an international treaty granted jurisdiction to US military courts. The men were therefore handed over to the United States. Once in the US, it was decided that only Captain Ashby and Navigator Schweitzer would face charges. They were indicted on charges of involuntary manslaughter and negligent homicide. The prosecution argued that they had deliberately flown lower and faster than regulations allowed, perhaps attempting to show off by flying under the cable. However, there was no concrete evidence to prove this. In their defense, the accused pilots stated they had been misled by old maps and an unreliable altimeter, insisting the collision was an accident. Eventually, they were acquitted, which caused a massive uproar in Italy. Some media outlets described the incident as a massacre, stressing that the negligence was so severe it bordered on intentional killing. Although cleared of charges related to the collision itself, Ashby and Schweitzer were court-martialed for conduct unbecoming and obstruction of justice due to the destruction of the videotape. In May 1999, they were convicted and dismissed from service. Ashby was sentenced to 6 months in prison, but was released after 4.5 months, while Schweitzer received no jail time. US President Bill Clinton formally apologized for America's role in the tragedy and assured victims' families that compensation would be arranged. However, the first financial compensation came from the Italian government in the year following the disaster. The US Congress initially voted against compensation, but international agreements eventually forced the US to contribute to the compensation fund later that same year. In 2011, an Italian newspaper obtained a previously classified US Marine Corps report on the incident. The report revealed that the pilots involved had already been disciplined for flying at dangerously low altitudes prior to the accident. It also confirmed that the altimeter which the crew had claimed was faulty, had been functioning correctly before and after the flight. The report recommended disciplinary action against the entire crew and their commanders. Still, in the years following the tragedy, and despite the widespread anger, no further action was taken. And with that, we reach the end of our story, or rather, our tragedy. Don't forget, if you enjoyed this story or this video, please give it a like and share it across all your social media accounts. And if this is your first time visiting the channel and you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any new videos. Until we meet again in new episodes and new stories, I wish you all a good night and goodbye.